Hello everyone, I'm Shruti Vijayvargi from BISP Solutions, and today I'm talking about the Excel financial function, and this I'm talking about asset depreciation functions. In my previous video I discussed all these five functions: AMORD, GRC, AMORLINC, DB, DDB and SLN, and in this session I am discussing about the SYD and VDB. So the first function is the SYD, and this function stands for the sum of years, and it returns the sum of years digits depreciation of an asset for a specific period. So this function calculating depreciation for a specific period. There are many acceptable methods for calculating depreciation schedules, some of which are more aggressive than others. The straight line method is very conservative and the declining balance method is more aggressive. The sum of years depreciation method is somewhere between the two, and in this video I will show you how to use the SYD function to calculate the sum of years depreciation value for a given year. The sum of years method is named for the way the number of years in the assets used for life is used to calculate the amount of depreciation allowed. The actual calculation of SYD is done as cost minus salvage value into life, that is, I am discussing about what is life, minus PER plus 1 into 2, and it will be divided by life plus 1. So this is however more difficult method to calculate, and it is not considered. It is the background method which is calculated in Excel. The actual SYD function in Excel takes the following four arguments. The first one is the initial cost of the asset. The second is its salvage value, that is the amount for which you can sell the asset when it's reached the end of its useful life. Then the number of years of its economic life, and then finally the period for which you are calculating sum of years depreciation. So let's go ahead and create an function. So I have an example of this SYD function. This is the initial cost, suppose, for an asset, and this is the salvage value. The life is 30 and the period can be 1 to 30. So the depreciation for this can be calculated. Select the cell, type equal, select SYD function, then first pass the cost, then the salvage value, then the life, and then the period. So this will be the cost after 30 years. We can calculate it for every year also. After 1 year, this is with the calculation. So this is the sum of years calculation. The next function is the VDB. It stands for variable declining balance, and it is used for calculating declining balance depreciation for a partial period. The declining balance and the double declining balance methods lets you capture most of an asset's depreciation early in its economic life. For a building which has useful life of 30 years, these aggressive depreciation schedules generate a huge tax offsets in the first few years. The downside of this type of schedule is that you get to offset almost no depreciation toward the end of the asset's economic life. If you use a variable declining balance approach, you can mix declining balance and straight line strategies to capture more of the benefits towards the end of the asset's life. In Excel, you use the VDB function to calculate variable declining balance depreciation, and this function returns the depreciation of asset for any period you specify, including partial periods using the double declining balance method or some other method you specify. So this function has the 7 arguments. The first one is the cost, which is the initial cost of an asset. Then we have the salvage value, which is the amount for which we can sell the item for scrap. Then the item's economic life, which is expressed in years, and then you need to tell Excel the start period and the end period for which you want to calculate the balance. The starting period is the period for which you want to calculate the depreciation. A start period must use the same unit as life, and the ending period for which you want to calculate the depreciation and period also must use the same unit as life. And then the final two arguments, which are factor and no switch, and both arguments are optional. The first is the factor, and factor is the same as in the double declining balancing function, which is DDB. If you want to use double declining balance, you set the factor to 2 or leave it blank because 2 is the default value. If you want to use triple declining balance, then you can set the factor to 3 and so on. And the final argument is called switch or switch method, and it is also an optional logical value specifying whether to switch to straight line depreciation when depreciation is greater than the declining balance calculation. If no switch is true, Microsoft Excel does not switch to straight line depreciation even when the depreciation is greater than the declining balance calculation. And if no switch is false or omitted, then Excel switches to straight line depreciation when depreciation is greater than the declining balance calculation. The idea behind the variable declining balance method is that you take the double declining or triple declining balance depreciation until that value is less than the straight line depreciation would be. When the double declining balance method depreciation would be less than the straight line depreciation, setting the argument to true causes Excel to stay with double declining balance instead of switching, while setting the argument to false would cause it to switch to the straight line method. So with those arguments in place, we can create the VDB function. So I have an example of VDP function. Here is the cost, which is the initial cost of an asset, salvage value, life of 10 years, start period and end period. So the VDP can be calculated selecting the cell, type in equal, select the VDP function and pass the references of all cells. First is the cost, then the salvage value, then the life, then start trade and end period. Factor no switch can be is optional. We can pass it or leave it. So this is the depreciation for 8 to 9 years. If we want to change the start period to 1 and end period to 2, then we see the depreciation is more than the 8 to 9 period. So this VDB function is used to calculate for a specific period. So this is how asset depreciation functions are worked. If you have any queries, you can comment me, and if you like my video, then thumbs up. Thank you.